Welcome to a new debate on Duo Discourse.
It's good to be here. And today we are walking a real razor's edge.
We really are. We're tackling two concepts that, for most of us, in the 21st century, feel like oil and water.
Complete opposites.
Exactly. So on one side, you've got love. And when we think of love today, what comes to mind? It's all spontaneity, autonomy.
Butterflies in the stomach.
Right. It's supposed to be wild and free and, you do you. It's the ultimate expression of your authentic self.
It has to be authentic to be real. That's the modern rule. It cannot and should not be forced.
And then on the other side of the ring, you have obedience, obligation, duty. Yeah, these are words that just feel cold, don't they? They feel rigid, maybe a little oppressive.
So that brings us to the core question.
Can you actually command someone to love?
It feels like the ultimate paradox.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm loving you because I have to, is that really love at all? Or does the duty part just kill the romance?
And I think the reason this feels so jarring to us is that we've culturally defined obedience as the opposite of love. We see it as, submission to power.
Someone with a big stick telling you what to do.
Exactly. But if we look at the source material we have today, which is a really fascinating stack from Christian scripture, Islamic Sufism, all the way to secular philosophy, there's a completely different argument being made.
Which is what, exactly?
That it isn't love versus obedience, it's a synthesis. The argument in these religious traditions is that structure doesn't kill love, it actually gives it form.
So obedience might be the language love speaks when it's directed toward the divine.
That's the idea. So our mission, I think, is to see if we can reconcile these two. Can submission and affection actually coexist?
Or are they just fundamentally incompatible? Let's find out.
Okay, so definitions first. This is where it all starts.
Right. And if we look at the scriptural definitions, specifically in the Christian texts we reviewed, there's this foundational and honestly kind of confrontational claim in the Gospel of John.
John 14.
Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commands.
Okay, but hold on a second. Because to a modern ear, that sounds like a threat. It sounds like, do what I say or else.
It totally does. It sounds like emotional blackmail.
Yeah.
If you really love me, you do what I want.
But the theologians we looked at argue that the order of operations there is absolutely critical. It doesn't say, keep my commands and then I'll love you. It says, if you love me.
So love comes first. It's a prerequisite.
Love is the engine. Obedience is the fruit. That's the metaphor they use. It's described as relational, not transactional.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, a transaction is, I do X, you give me Y. I follow the rules, I get into heaven, that's a contract. But this view argues obedience is a reaction. I do this because of who you are.
So if you love someone, you just naturally want to align your will with theirs.
Precisely. Think about it in a human relationship. If you deeply love someone and you know they hate it when you leave dishes in the sink, you don't do the dishes because you're terrified. You do it because you care about their peace of mind.
Okay, I get that. But this is where the philosophical definition really clashes with the modern one. We have these interesting sources on bioethics that point out modern culture defines love largely as affirmation.
Yes. This distinction is crucial.
The modern view is to love someone is to affirm their choices, their autonomy, their happiness. If you love me, you support whatever I want to do, period.
Right. It's a kind of relativism. Love is defined by the individual's happiness. If it makes you happy, I love it for you.
So under that definition, if obedience causes suffering or restriction or means you have to say no to yourself.
The modern definition rejects it as unloving. Automatically.
But the theological definition in these texts isn't affirmation, it's benevolence.
And there is a massive gap between those two. Benevolence means willing the good of the other, even if it's difficult, even if they don't like it in the moment.
It's the difference between the friend who buys you another drink when you're already drunk and the friend who takes your keys away.
That is a perfect analogy. The first friend is affirming you. The second is practicing benevolence. So these traditions argue that love isn't just letting you be you, it's helping you become the best version of you. It's about transformation, not just affirmation.
That idea of transformation,
Mm-hmm.
That actually segues perfectly into this fascinating perspective from the Islamic tradition we looked at. From Ibn Arabi.
Oh, this is beautiful stuff.
And it really shifted the ground for me. He talks about mahabba or love, but he frames it almost as a kind of knowledge.
He does. Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi mystic, argues that love is a knowledge you can't really define, you can only taste or feel it. But his key insight for us here is how he connects obedience to the idea of beauty.
Beauty. How on earth does beauty connect to rules?
Well, he says God is El Zahir, the manifest in all things.
So everything we see is a reflection of the divine.
Precisely. And Ibn Arabi's point is that the basis of all love is magnificence or beauty. We're wired, spiritually and biologically to love what is beautiful. When you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, you don't feel oppressed by its size. You feel awestruck. You submit to the experience.
So obedience in this view isn't about cowering before a tyrant with a big stick.
No, it's an act of recognizing the magnificence of the Creator. We obey because we're drawn to that beauty, like a moth to a flame. The command isn't a burden, it's a pathway that gets you closer to the beautiful thing you already desire. It's more like gravity than shackles.
That is incredibly poetic, and I really want to buy into it. But I have to play the skeptic here for a minute.
Please do.
Because when you strip away the poetry, you run into some really hard logical problems. I mean, if we're obeying a command just because it comes from God, we run right into the arbitrariness problem.
Yeah, the old Euthyphro dilemma.
Classic Plato. The dilemma is something good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it is good?
And it's a classic trap for a reason.
It really matters. Because if goodness is just whatever God says, then morality feels totally arbitrary. If God commanded cruelty, if God commanded us to torture a puppy for fun, would we be obedient and do it?
It's a very disturbing thought.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the answer is yes, then obedience is actually dangerous. It makes God look like a capricious despot who just makes up rules on a whim.
A terrifying concept, and philosophers have wrestled with it for centuries. But the sources we have, particularly from Robert Adams on divine command theory, offer a way out. It's called modified divine command theory.
And how does that solve the trap?
Adams argues that a command is binding only because it comes from a loving God. He says God's nature is fixed. God isn't just making up rules. God is goodness. God is love.
So God couldn't command cruelty.
He couldn't, not for its own sake.
Mm-hmm.
It would violate his own nature. It would be a contradiction, like a square circle. It's an impossibility.
So the command isn't the source of morality in a vacuum. The character of the commander is the source.
That is the whole distinction. Obedience is safe in this view because the commander is essentially benevolent. You trust the command because you trust the character of the one giving it. You assume there's a good reason, even if you can't see it.
But that still leaves the autonomy objection. And this is a big one for modern listeners. We had some sources referencing Kant.
Of course.
And Kant basically says that real maturity requires moral autonomy. If I just follow rules from the outside, I'm like a child. To be fully human, I need to legislate the moral law for myself. I need to understand why it's right, not just do it because I was told to.
That's the modern imperative, isn't it? Think for yourself. Question authority.
Right, so isn't religious obedience just infantile?
Well, the religious counterargument argues that autonomy isn't actually the highest good. Alignment with truth is.
Can you unpack that a little?
Sure. Imagine you have a really serious, complex illness. You go to a specialist who has studied medicine for 40 years. Now, if you say, I value my autonomy, so I'm going to prescribe my own medication based on a Google search, you are being autonomous.
But you're also being foolish. You're probably going to get worse.
Exactly. The religious argument is that human reason is limited. We can't see the whole picture. So if you believe there's a higher intelligence that loves you, the specialist, so to speak, then trusting that intelligence is actually the most intelligent course you can take.
So it's not abandoning reason. It's recognizing the limits of reason.
Precisely. It's an act of trust. It's outsourcing the decision to a better processor.
But that brings us to motivation, because you can obey for very different reasons. I can obey the doctor because I trust her, or I can obey because I am terrified of dying.
This is crucial. This is where the rubber meets the road.
We talked about legalism. This is the person who obeys solely out of fear of hell or desire for heaven. They're just ticking boxes. They're anxious. Did I do enough? Is God mad at me?
And the sources are very hard on this. They call it loveless obedience. The Christian text references the clanging cymbal. If you have all this obedience, but you have not love, you are just noise.
Just noise.
It's the difference between legalism, which is trying to earn salvation, and obedience, which is trust fueled by love. One is slavery, the other is service.
There's this beautiful Jewish concept in the sources that really stuck with me. Simcha shel mitzvah.
Yes, the joy of being commanded.
That phrase is so counterintuitive, the joy of being commanded. Most people don't find joy in being told what to do. My kids certainly don't.
But think about it in a relationship context again. The source used the analogy of a spouse. If you know what pleases your spouse, maybe it's bringing them coffee in a specific mug It isn't a chore.
No, it's a connection. It feels good to do it.
It's a way to say, I love you without words. For the believer, the law isn't a burden. It's a revelation of the beloved's will. It takes the guesswork out of love. You know exactly how to connect. My beloved likes this, so I'll do this.
And the Quranic view reinforces this. It says Allah loves them and they love him. It's circular.
It's reciprocal. It's not one-sided domination. It's a loop of affection and response.
So if we accept that this loop exists, we have to ask the big why question. I mean, why does God need obedience? Is it just a power trip?
Right. Does the creator of the universe really need me to pray 5 times a day?
This is where we get into the concept of marifa, or deep knowledge. We look at Al-Ghazali and the Sufi perspectives. And the argument is, God doesn't need obedience. We need it.
Humans need it for what?
To know. The sources argue you cannot truly love what you do not know. And you can't know God if your heart is cluttered with the self, with ego, with distractions, with sin.
So obedience is like cleaning.
Exactly. Al-Ghazali uses the metaphor of the heart as a mirror. If the mirror is covered in dust and grime, it can't reflect the light. Obedience is the discipline, the polishing cloth, that cleans the mirror so it can reflect the divine. There's that famous Hadith Qudsi referenced by Ibn Arabi, I was a hidden treasure and I love to be known.
I love to be known. It's so hauntingly beautiful.
But someone might ask, and I am asking, doesn't that make God sound needy? I love to be known. Is God insecure?
That's a fair question. But the Sufi interpretation clarifies it. The benefit is for the human. It's about the vessel. The heart has to be emptied of otherness to be filled with the divine. So obedience is the process of emptying. It's not God needing validation. It's God providing a path for us to reach our highest potential.
Speaking of emptying the self, we have to talk about Rabia al-Adawiyya. Her story,
Yeah.
well, it's intense.
She's a towering figure in mysticism, a foundational female voice in Sufism.
She introduced this concept of pure love. She famously refused to worship God out of fear of hell or hope for paradise. She wanted to worship solely for his essence.
It's a radical stance. It rejects the whole transactional nature of religion. She's saying, even if there were no heaven and no hell, you are still worthy of worship. She wanted the giver, not the gifts.
There's that incredible anecdote where someone asked her if she hated Satan.
I love this story.
Most religious people would say, of course I hate the devil. It's part of the job description.
Right, but her response was, my love for God leaves no room in me for hatred of the devil.
That's just profound. Her heart was so full of the positive, the love of God, that there was literally no space left for the negative.
It shows that for her, obedience wasn't a struggle against evil so much as an overwhelming attraction to the good. She even rejected marriage, which was very countercultural because she felt she belonged entirely to God. She said she had no self left to give a husband.
That is a level of devotion that's hard for modern minds to even comprehend. It's beautiful, but it's also alien. And if Rabia represents the beauty of obedience, Kierkegaard represents the terror of it.
Yes. We absolutely cannot discuss obedience without talking about Abraham and Isaac.
This story, it haunts me. It haunts everyone who reads it. God commands Abraham to sacrifice his own son. It violates every ethical norm. It violates the do not kill command. It violates a father's love. Kierkegaard dives right into that horror.
He does. He doesn't shy away. He calls it the teleological suspension of the ethical.
Which means, what in simple terms?
It means that the ethical, the universal rules of right and wrong, are temporarily suspended for a higher purpose, or telos. Kierkegaard argues that if you just look at this ethically, Abraham is a murderer, plain and simple, but faith posits a category higher than the ethical.
He calls Abraham the knight of faith.
Right. And the key is what he calls the double movement. This is fascinating and often missed. Abraham didn't just resign himself to losing Isaac. He had faith that he would get Isaac back in this life.
Wait, so he was willing to kill him, but he believed he wouldn't actually lose him.
It's a paradox. It's absurd to the rational mind. He trusted God's goodness so completely that he believed God would fulfill his promises, even when the command made it seem impossible. It was a test of trust in God's character over the logic of the situation.
That's a terrifying kind of trust. It requires abandoning logic. And that leads us directly to the secular critiques, which we have to address.
Absolutely. A philosopher like Kai Nielsen would say this whole setup is flawed.
He raises the problem of verification, right?
Yeah.
He argues that even if we obey God because he's good, we're using our own moral yardstick to judge God as good in the first place.
You've got it. We look at God and say, okay, he seems good. I like what he says, so I'll obey. Nielsen's point is that this means our own moral judgment is actually superior to the command. We are the judges of God.
which completely undermines the idea of absolute submission. If I'm the one deciding God is worthy, then I am the ultimate authority.
It suggests our conscience is the final arbiter, yes.
And then there's the problem of the other. If you're like Rabia, so focused on this vertical relationship with God, do you just neglect the horizontal? Do you ignore the people around you?
That's a huge and valid concern. If you're so heavenly minded, are you of any earthly good?
Exactly. While you're polishing the mirror of your heart, do you notice the person starving next to you?
But the sources, especially the Jewish and Christian texts on charity, would argue that true love of God must manifest as love for neighbor.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
It's non-negotiable. A mystic who claims to love God but ignores suffering is, according to these traditions, a liar. The argument is that the mystic doesn't escape the world to stay away. They return to it with a new perspective, with benevolence. They see the manifest in everyone.
So we've looked at definitions, objections, mystics, critics. What remains unresolved here? Because these still feel like two very different worlds.
I think what remains is the tension of the unified will.
The unified will.
The sources suggest that the dichotomy between love and obedience is, well, it's temporary. In the highest state of spiritual development, the believer doesn't choose to obey anymore. Their will becomes so aligned with the divine that obedience is just their natural state, like breathing.
The source mentioned the metaphor of the stone and silver.
Yes. For the true lover, the stone and the silver are equal. Wealth and poverty are the same. Praise and blame are the same. As long as they are with the beloved, the circumstances just don't matter. The will is unified.
That is a beautiful ideal, truly. But I think the skeptic in our outline points out the unbridgeable gap, which is that for the non-believer, or even the struggling believer, this surrender looks completely indistinguishable from losing your identity. It looks like dangerous conformity. It can look like cult behavior.
And that is the risk. It's a very real risk.
Without that inner reality of love, obedience is just a crushing weight. But without the form of obedience, love can just be chaotic emotion.
And that is the crux of it. The internal logic of faith holds up. If you believe in a loving God, obedience makes perfect sense. But it requires a leap that reason alone can't justify. You can't logic your way into that circle of trust.
So where does that leave us? We started by asking if they can coexist.
I think we've found that not only can they coexist, but in these traditions, they really depend on each other. You can't have one without the other.
The tension itself drives the growth.
I think so. Perhaps the conclusion is that God wants a love that's disciplined enough to obey.
And an obedience that's passionate enough to love.
Exactly. It isn't one or the other, it's the fusion.
And it leaves us with a provocative thought to walk away with. We value freedom above almost everything else. We want to be the captains of our own souls. But is true freedom found in total autonomy? Or could it be found in that Jewish concept, the joy of being commanded by something greater than oneself?
That's a question everyone has to answer for themselves.
Thanks for joining us on Duo Discourse.